Welcome to Thrive 3.0. The Thrive Consortium emerged from COVID-19 because of COVID-19. Seeing the pandemic from the perspective of an opportunity than as a stumbling block, a select group of young, inspiring minds with a pan-Nigerian mindset decided in late April 2020 to provide a platform that will serve as a springboard of hope and inspiration and a podium for experts across the broad spectrum of human endeavor to discuss the critical mass, robustly engaging with the Nigerian people and inspiring crucial conversations that contribute to making a better Nigeria and the world a better place. That COVID-19 is a huge pandemic of health and economic consequences taking the obvious. As such, today's Thrive series is blessed to have in its podium some of Nigeria's finest and brightest brains and personalities who will speak to the measures and the confluence of ideas being deployed by government and the organized private sector to address the issues arising from and ultimately reconfigure the economy going forward. Welcome to Track 3.0, which has been aptly named Repositioning the Nigerian Economy for the post-COVID-19 environment. So I'd like to first of all introduce to you our panelists this afternoon. First on our card is Mrs. Usarakin Akusa Demore, humble, unassuming, intelligent, and a quintessential personality. Mrs. Demure broke the glass ceiling by becoming the first woman director of the Central Bank of Nigeria. She retired in December 2009 after 53 years of meritorious service. Mrs. Demure is a graduate of Economics and Statistics from the Moscow Institute of Economics and Statistics, and she has a diploma in Russian language and preliminary studies from the Kyiv State University, which is now in Ukraine. She has decades of corporate experience and succinctly understands the landscape and dynamism of the business environment. A doyen and a dame of the boardroom, is currently the chairman GT Bank, Nigeria's leading financial institution. If I am not mistaken, she's also the first woman to be the chairman of GT Bank. She's a member of several professional associations, including the Society for Human Resource Management of America, Nigeria Statistical Association, Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, and the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. She sits on the board of Trust Fund Pensions PLC and of LACO Microsoft Bank Limited. The audience will be blessed with the frankness and the ease at which Mrs. Demore cascades her counsel across. She is a doting wife, mother, and grandmother who, despite her busy schedule, does not joke with her service to God and humanity. Please join me to welcome Mrs. Sarakin Demore to the Thrive podium as a panel. Also today, seated as a panelist is Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi. Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi is a consummate professional and expert in the electricity sector in Nigeria. With about 2 decades of experience and a formidable project management expertise, Engineer Fadeyibi credentials in both the generation and distribution sector of the electricity value chains integrated. He was previously the MD of Transcorp Power Limited, where he championed the company's growth from a 160 megawatt power plant capacity to a 634 megawatt capacity within 2 years. He is currently the MD to CEO of the electricity distribution company, unarguably one of Nigeria's foremost electricity distribution firms. Engineer Adeoye is a mechanical engineering graduate from the State University of New York and is a fellow, Nigeria Society of Engineers, fellow, Institute of Credit Administrators, fellow, Nigeria Institute of Mechanical Engineering, member, Institute of Directors, and member, Council of Registration of Engineers, COREN. Join me to welcome Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi to Thrive podium as a panelist. Last but not the least is Prince Clem Ikanede Agba. Prince Clem Ikanede Agba is no less a child of privilege, wielding power and privilege with fetching humility and exemplary focus. He has demonstrated with his life's trajectory that royalty, economics, philanthropy, and politics fundamentally address transformation of the human condition for good. As yet, unabashedly maintains this unique philosophical footing in both his private and public actions. Through the depth of his worldwide views, Clem places his opinion on people, even in contemplation of issues that should ordinarily engender self-interest and preservation of the same in the cosmos of rising complexities and defining battles of survival. Clem is a graduate of economics from the then Bender State University, now Ambosali University at Loma. He also holds 2 master's degrees in business administration, first from the University of Benin, specializing in management, and second from the Arizona State University, Tempe, Arizona, USA, specializing in supply chain management. Clem is a thoroughbred professional in the oil and gas industry, working with Chevron at various executive levels, with stints in Nigeria, United States of America, and Kazakhstan. Clem retired from Chevron in July 2019 after 29 years of meritorious service. Between this period, Clem took a leave of absence to work as Commissioner for Environment and Public Utilities, and also as Commissioner for Land, Housing and Service in Edo State between 2009 and 2016. He championed the urban engineering and development of Benin City and other towns in Edo State. Clem currently is in the saddle at this critical junction of Nigeria's existence as the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, where he, along with his colleagues in the federal cabinet, is putting his nose to the grindstone to deliver on priority mandate of the ministry towards achieving the overarching goals of national development. Please join me to welcome our Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Alba, to the tripod podium as a panelist. Mrs. Sarah Chidebere Joe will moderate this event. Sarah has a PhD in media from the University of Huddersfield, United Kingdom, where she currently is a research fellow. She's a lecturer of media, communication, and cultural studies at the Rivers State University, Port Harcourt, where she tutors broadcasting and media writing courses. Sarah is a published author with renowned international academic journals, including Media, War, and Conflict, and the Journal of African Media Studies. Sarah has presented several papers in many international conferences, including the Political Studies Association annual conferences and the 69th International Communication Association. In early March 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Sarah created Elan Hub, a news and media website that principally focuses on happenings in Rivers State. She serves as the platform CEO, while our team
the slides
is made up of our former students and graduates from the Mass Communication Department of the Rivers State University in Nigeria. Sarah is a co-convener of the Tribe Consortium and is passionate about giving hope, positiveness, and inspiration to a world that has become so used to the opposite. Please join me also to welcome Sarah as she moderates this event. I will now hand over to Sarah to carry on with the event. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you so much, Mr. Solomon Abba, and good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Thrive 3.0. Thank you especially to our guest, Chairman GT Bank, Mr. Saratin Demuran, CEO, Eco Electricity Distribution Company, Engineer Adeoye Fadibi, and the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba. Thank you for finding the time to come grace the Thrive platform. I'd also like to say thank you to our organizers putting together this very important event, members of the Thrive Consortium, especially Solomon Agba and Mr. Kalio Joseph. Thank you to all our support staff in Nigeria and in the UK. Thank you to our audience for not only finding the time to register, but also to join in the conversation today. At the end of this event, our prayer is that you would have gained insight into government, banking, and power sectors in improving our COVID-19 influenced new normal. Our guests will each speak for 10 minutes, and then we will commence this question segment. So please pay close attention and take down questions that come to mind. Type your questions into the Q&A box and tap send. They will be processed and passed on to me at the right time. Note that this event is also cast live on Facebook and will be available on demand on YouTube at the end of the event. The page on Facebook is elanhub.net, elanhub.net. Our first speaker is unquestionably one of the best minds in Nigeria's financial sector. She is the first woman chairman of the Guarantee Trust Bank. Please make welcome Mrs. Osaritin Demure. Madam, the floor is yours. We need to unmute. Okay, good.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for inviting me for this session. So much has been said about me. I was just smiling. Is that me they're talking about or some other person? I want to thank you for the invitation. The topic, repositioning the Nigerian economy for the post-COVID-19 environment. And the question I asked when I got to that was, post-COVID, how do we know when it's ending? It's still on. Who knows when it will come to an end? So I would rather say during COVID-19. So we have some slides here. I don't know if Carlio got in it. I sent it to Carlio for him so that every other person can.
Okay, I'm sure he's processing it.
Yeah, but there's no attachment. There's no attachment in the mail.
No attachment?
Oh, it didn't come through.
Yes, yes. Sure.
You may need to just talk through them then.
I don't know, Sarah, I cannot step down and someone take, but by the time to finish.
Okay.
I don't know, I need the slides.
Okay, great. Okay.
Is that possible? I'm sorry, my apologies.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we'll take our second speaker. He describes himself on Twitter as the GE guy, and I'm sure he's paying homage to his years working with General Electric. He is the CEO of Eco Electricity Distribution Company, the largest electricity distribution company in Nigeria. Please welcome Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi. You're welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I forgot that I called myself the GE guy for a while, but I think, thank you for having me. Again, I just wanted to, just thank and congratulate the organizers for putting together this session. And also both the Demre also here. I'm honored to be, or privileged to be in this gathering. Very quickly, what I wanted to try to go over was when I heard this was talking about the reposition of the Nigerian economy for the post-COVID-19 environment. And what, thank you, Joseph, I was kind of buying time for you to put that up. And what it would mean, I represent probably the power sector space in here, or even call it the utility space, which will be something that is going to be quite key to our realities as we move out of COVID-19. I was trying to enjoy what Mrs. Demre was starting with just now. When do we know the post-COVID-19 will happen? When will it end? Will it end? Of course, we always say it will end in Jesus' name because we're a religious nation. But I think realities say that even when it ends, just like many flus, we would have to live with it as a flu that exists, and hopefully the vaccines will be in place. But then let me go back to trying to put this in the perspective of the power space, and then we'll now take that. I'm sure it will now apply to every other thing: gas, water, any other utility, food security, and other things that we use. So if we go to the first page that I have, I'll try to go through quickly. I tried to touch on some points. One, let's look at prior to the outbreak of COVID-19. The power sector in itself had a lot of issues and lingering challenges, of course, which most people on this call are well aware of to different extents. The bottom line is that from a user perspective, it's always seen when you don't have 24 hours power supply, the bottom line is that it's then deemed to be inadequate in terms of supply. Availability is one thing, and then you have quality another thing. We, of course, had a lot of different reasons or excuses, I would call it, because when we look at this as all users, anything that doesn't give you enough power that you need is an excuse. You talk about anything from obsolete power generation, you talk about transmission issues, distribution infrastructure, and we say many, many things. We talk about cost-reflective tariffs, power equipment, and all this affects the power requirements, both for individuals and businesses. Of course, when COVID-19 came, the pandemic, one of the first major things that happened was an immediate lockdown. So just like you have the hand of God or a force majeure, I'll use hand of God to, I would call it something that is out of the control. When I say out of control, when something happens like a pandemic, the first thing you want to do is try and contain it and hope that the spread doesn't kill more people. So one of the things that happened, for example, in Nigeria was that lockdown, both interstate and even local, even in some cases isolated to your own house within the smaller states. What we saw then was a reality that faced us in terms of essential commercial activities across the country. Things were slowing down. And of course, what that meant for a power sector was that most people were going to be at home. There was going to be need for online schooling, online meetings like the one we're having now. There was going to be a major financial, in terms of drops in revenues because businesses were going to shut down. So there was going to be a risk to people's income stream. Meanwhile, they were all going to be in the house. And guess what? They're all going to use power. They're all going to have to interact with people outside. They're going to charge their phones. They're going to, hopefully, if they have data, go online. They're going to have their kids go on online school. They might have to even have meetings so that they can at least maintain their jobs. And then there's a risk that they might not even get paid because their companies might not be able to get the revenue required to maintain staff salaries. The shift in this energy demand became very interesting for me as a power sector, at least as a distribution company leader. What that meant for me was, one, quickly trying to ensure that there was going to be a kind of industrial, commercial, and then residential alignment to try and understand how we're able to shift the energy so that the right people get the energy that is needed at their houses. And then while understanding that as a business or a P&L leader, I needed to ensure that there's no loss of revenue. Of course, one, the tariff for the residential customers are relatively lower. Most cases, even lower than the average cost of supply. And but the point is, it's a utility, it's an essential commodity, and people must get the power. The effect of the COVID-19 pandemic as a whole has been very high. And of course, seeing that this was not going away anytime soon, we realized that all businesses would have to adapt and of course redefine their business strategies to fit the new business culture, at least the changes that we have that was happening all over the world, and indeed, of course, Nigeria, and then whatever area we're in, Lagos in my case. Again, the reality of it has brought to light two very apparent factors. One was, it was very clear that the world was not adequately prepared for such a major disruption in life as we know it, even though this had happened some century ago. I like to, as we talk about the world, then we talk about Nigeria, where it mostly affects us right now. It was very evident that we were not adequately prepared for such a major disruption in life. From a power business, I have to take ownership and say that there was nothing that prepared us for this extent or this kind of major thing happening. We must say thank God, like Mrs. Demoren, there's a religious aspect to my life. So we say thank God that the worst did not happen or has not happened, and it does not happen in our country, because it allowed us to look at how we should ensure that power as a utility, we have enough, we're able to get it at the right cost reflective, and also we're able to get it to everybody that needs it. And again, get the revenues required so that we can keep our operations going and pay fellow Nigerians that work at this place. And also have them work in a safe environment. So ensuring that global standards of safety and all the required tools and equipment required to do it. And also to safety, not only to our staff, but also to the public, to ensure that there were no fatalities. To forge ahead, we basically had to re-strategize and make adjustments in our business policies, as well as our daily lives. Of course, prior to the lockdown, due to the onset of the pandemic, at the co-electricity distribution company, we formed immediately what we call the COVID task force. Really, and what that team was to do was to put together a business continuity plan. Of course, there's one that existed, but they were meant to relook at our business continuity plan and have one that would guide us during this COVID period, a very unsure period, I might add. One of the things we decided immediately, again, while watching the news, CNN and news everywhere in the world, and how it was affecting them, of course, and fearing the worst for our own families and friends, or let me just use loved ones, everybody was basically also developing their own life continuity plans as we were developing our own business continuity plans. And one of the disruptors was to ensure that all our essential staff were going to be at work as essential services providers during this period. This was not going to be a mandate. And I don't think this was going to, in my opinion, going to be effective if you were going to instruct people to come and work just because they're essential services people. If their loved ones deemed it fit that they were not going to be working in a safe environment, they might choose to leave their jobs. So I thought a responsible company, which is what we decided to do and what we are, was to ensure that we communicated what we're trying to do and ensure that the staff were comfortable that they were going to be working safely. One of the first things we did was to shift the focus to the use of technology. One of the first key things that was clear, as we're doing now, how the importance of online meetings was going to happen, reporting of faults, and a number of other things that we had to do. Also, even collections and appraisals. Our priority was to ensure that the safety of our staff while guaranteeing optimal availability of energy to our customers, basically to make the lockdown order bearable. Of course, we were going to have challenges achieving all this. Our assessment of the challenges we experienced and the ones that were likely to be encountered as a result of the pandemic included some of this, which I wanted to share with everyone. We went into the last part, which would be the post-COVID and how the economy gets repositioned. There was a delay in execution of projects due to supply chain disruptions. Things like metering. I mean, you know, where the rollout of meters. A number of offshore content or parts of it that were coming from outside. There was an immediate slowdown. Again, that's why I said this was something that was a bit out of our control. Of course, the Nigerian Customs Service, again, came back and there was a waiver that was provided, and that helped some of the people to be able to move their things through. Collection challenges due to the financial crisis. This is the one I call the life continuity plan. Of course, we mentioned a number of countries here, but again, I'd like to talk about Nigeria. The bottom line is we saw where a number of households had to defer their utility payments or basically suspend it and hope not to be disconnected. And they were doing this as a clear response to their economic situation. We had places like Ghana, where the president announced that the country will absorb the payments for the poorest customers and also up to 50% of the other customers for a period of 3 months. when this resulted, of course, in pushbacks from our customers. And there was a debate in Nigeria on whether Nigeria was going to toe the same line as Ghana. There was a bit of a premature or maybe a leakage in terms of information. There was an announcement that there was going to be a 2-month free electricity period. Of course, while the intent was good, again, there needed to be a clearer plan. And again, as we reposition, I'm sure, God forbid, but if it happens again, we should be, I hope, a bit more ready as an economy to handle potential crises like this. What we saw was a spike in what we call our aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. What that means for people that are not familiar with this is that we had significant losses because people just assumed that the 2 months had kicked off and there was a kind of palliative or recognition of the economic situation of people. The problem with that was that the discos would not be able to get the revenue required to pay the market, and everybody else in the market relies on us, so the generators and everybody. In the early days of the lockdown, we had to quickly move our infrastructure, like I said earlier, to ensure that we're channeling the power to residential customers that needed it, so that at least the alternative to this will have been bad for us as a business because it would mean we have stranded energy. The health and safety concerns of our frontline workers, a lot of our staff are going to face hazards in the course of carrying out their duties. So to ensure that they were not exposed to this virus, we had to do a significant amount of sensitization of our staff and also get the right kits in place to ensure that they were safe. We also did a number of different things, but not to bore everybody here, but one of them was around even transportation and logistics to ensure that it was COVID safe in terms of having to provide facilities to different zones, all the pool cars, everything, just dispatched everything out to be able to pick and have the staff in particular areas come in safely during this period. To kind of start to bring this back to the topic that we're discussing here, as a business that's determined to be one of the most essential sectors in the economy, we figured out that there were 5 steps to take in getting what we call a new normal. And what we call a new normal is essentially whenever this thing goes away or whenever we live with it. When I say live with it, that means that we have precautions in place, whether vaccines or other things to address it. The first thing we need to look at, and I know we have some experts here, the Honorable Minister, Mrs. Delmer, in the budget and planning industry. As they take, I'm just one industry that they would probably take information from as they start to put together their strategic plans as a whole from an economy standpoint. The first thing is to resolve. Resolve means that in this case, we need to just, without making any excuses, we need to determine the scale, we need to determine the pace, and then the depth of action that is required to protect the staff. Resilience is something in terms of trying to manage critical business operations, in terms of trying to stabilize international supply chain. If you think about it, our reliance on the international supply chain in terms of imports, while it's good, I think as reality has hit us in the face with this big major scare, I almost guarantee, and I can't wait to hear what the Honorable Minister has to say about this, but I'm sure they're already thinking in line of starting to enforce more the local content capacity in a number of different areas. Because let's just imagine a scenario whereby, God forbid, again, like I said, that this goes on for a year plus or more. And then let's imagine that the ports and the capacity to bring in more was reduced. Imagine a doomsday theory would be that every country for itself, we would slowly lack or at least not have everything we needed or need in place to survive. And then imagine if the internet went down. I know it's a doomsday scenario I'm building, but there's a reason. allows us to think of a worst case scenario, just like we do when we buy insurance and we pay the premiums on time. We need to ensure that there's a scenario planning and clear response management selfishly as a nation, which means if we need to develop people and businesses and SMEs, I'll wait to the Q&As for that. We need to, as far as power is concerned, we need to plan safe return to sites. We need to take into account, we needed to take into account changes that were required. And of course, employee health and safety. Then we started to reimagine, which is what we needed to do. What the next normal operating model should be, and bearing in mind that the lessons learned during this COVID-19 crisis and how those could change our operating models. And of course, finally, which is what we're discussing here, is the reforms. The reforms is essential at every business level, every industry, and even as a nation as a whole, to understand how the regulatory and competitive environment needs to change and will change, and including the impact on us. To close out, I'll talk about a few next steps. Under each of the areas I just brought on my last chat, we talked about the resolve. We're putting of course, like I said, we had our task force in place. We had our business continuity plan in place. We increased, of course, our business to customer digital channels, 24-hour self-care portals. We increased our payment channels. We had to increase our social media engagement. This is just so that we could maintain the necessary financial liquidity and supply chains. That's one. And two, to ensure that we have satisfied customers that will be willing to pay their bills when they get it. The internet became quite important. So again, the Internet of Things. I talked about resilience, and I'll go past that. In terms of return, basically, we need to start to think through, if this is going to go on like this for a while, how do we start to look at the segmentation? How do we look at staff, essential, non-essential, people that have underlying health issues that cannot be at their place of work? How do we build the right set of skills for the future that can be useful? How can I engage my organization and still provide a lot of value and not necessarily have to be there every day? How do I ensure that I'm digitally, in terms of being digitally collaborative, get the right training in place? We need to train the workforce to ensure that they're comfortable with the Internet of Things. And basically, if you move into reimagine, we thought about just technology-driven. Again, that keeps coming up. We say, yes, we are a technology-driven company, but then we have to be in the forefront of automation. If not most of our business processes, but all. It has to be the next default position post-COVID for every organization to test their ability to be automated. Automate your processes so that nothing stops. A single stoppage in one of your manual processes can, lack of a better word to use, destroy the whole organization. We need to reconsider our technology priorities. We at ECO, for example, of course, we have platforms for our smart meters, but we need to now look at how do we ensure that we meter all. It's not even up to the regulator only or the customers, but even from that perspective, we need to ensure that not just meter all, but smart metering, and then the technology in place to ensure that things like energy theft or areas where we have revenue leakages can be protected with technology. On other systems, whether it's the SAP, the CRM and other things, in terms of planning, performance, and monitoring of our network, as well, of course, most importantly, our customer experience that has become more important than ever. And understanding the extent to which the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the operation of our business models, and again, putting strategies to work around it. Okay. We're sitting and talking non-stop as a code disco on how we can work, and even from the board of the company, myself, the management, and various teams, we need to start working out practical methodologies that would include the more frequent use of market data, extensive stress testing, which is what I said most companies and industries and even nations will do. we need to look at our risk limit dashboards. And then more than ever before, if this will not happen to us again, we need to look at advanced scenario modeling. We need to model scenarios and test the system, stress testing. Okay. And finally, for me, is the reform, like I said earlier. We at EcoDisco are aware of our market environment, and we're already reconsidering, and in some cases already even started to implement them where we can, the strategic orientation of our portfolios. We're in the final stage of various partnerships, and also where there was an issue on tariff increases, of course, which has slowed down right now. Partnerships with potential embedded generators within our network, metering, training, all with the intent, and all these things is to develop a reform strategy that is strictly tagged post-COVID-19 and how we are able to perform and maintain and sustain our business.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer David. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And please remember, the event is live on Facebook, ellenhub.net. Thank you so much for your presentation. And now we'll take Madam's presentation. Ma'am, are you ready? The floor is yours. And you speak for 10 minutes, ma'am. You're muted. You may need to. Okay, great.
Good afternoon once again. Apologies for that slight technology issue. And we need to brace up so we don't have more of that going forward, because that's going to be a pen going forward. Repositioning the Nigerian economy. The role of the banking and the financial sector in the past, in the post-COVID environment. Well, right now, we're like a patient with the drip on as a people. The drip is on the countries, on the world, because people are dying. However, if we go through what has happened in the last 3 months, the human cost, next slide, the human cost of COVID-19. I'll just take Nigerian instead of comparing with international, though it's worthwhile to compare. We've had over 500,000 people dead as a result of health complications created by COVID-19 in the world, 500,000. In Nigeria, we have over 600. Sat yesterday. To know that we only had one index case in end of February, March. And what has been the cost to the country? With total of over 10 million in the world have been infected so far. So we have 500,000 deaths. And in Nigeria, we have 27, a little over 27,000 already. Whereas in March, we had just one index case. In the last 1 month, it has more than tripled, which is why we're at this level. And we also end up, of course, most people are at home, they're working from home. We end up having people, we wipe up maybe about 8% of working hours across the world during the second quarter. That's what has been expected. And because yes, productivity has increased, but uncertainty at the place of work is high. At the end of second quarter, we're also expecting about we have almost 90 million people face the risk of hunger. Whereas prior to this time, it was half. We had about 45. Now we're going to have a lot of people facing the risk. It's a lot of uncertainty, we keep saying, ahead. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. So the Nigerian economy, which was projected for it to grow by 2.5 by IMF prior to the COVID pandemic. It's already in desperate need of reposition with falling external reserves. Of course, the oil price is nothing to write home about. We saw it. We know what is happening. So the external reserves are down. There's rising inflation. We have dwindling equity markets, stagnant foreign exchange investment inflow. Nobody wants to come to uncertain environment. It's the world over. It's not just Nigeria. Nobody, everybody, just keep your money safe where you think it's safe and wait till issues, economic situations improve. And of course, we have the contentious foreign exchange policy. Just yesterday, officially, rate has moved from 360 to 380. That is official. But in the parallel market, of course, it's 450. So that's a lot of uncertainty. How can you get foreign exchange and want to work at that level? With the pandemic, with what came with the pandemic was closed. Everywhere was closed. That is the reality. The fear of the pandemic was the beginning of confusion, pandemonium. We went into lockdown with I think 131 cases and 2 deaths. But now we know 5 weeks later, look what the rising figures we have. And the outbreak hasn't reached the peak. Because one, our people are not compliant. Many people don't believe that COVID-19 is real. They think it's something that government is using to deceive the people because they don't want to give them whatever. But this would take a lot of enlightenment. How do we educate our people? All this myth they have that, oh, we're African, nothing can happen to us. The heat will work. But people are living, look at the way people live in the communities. What we're having now is community infection more. A lot of community infection because we know where people live and what is happening. People can barely shoulder to shoulder. So we need to take the necessary initiative by government, how to bring this to attention of staff, what to people and what to do. Since this thing started, what has happened? Government cannot do this alone. This is not the time where so it's a government issue, it's an economic issue, government has to solve the problem. Everybody is involved. Many businesses during the time, and we thank God for the initiative, they showed compassion and a lot of isolation centers have been built, treatment centers have been built by corporate bodies, by private businesses, just to help the public sector combat the epidemic. So it's not something that government can do alone. And we just want to thank them for the initiative. They keep coming at different levels. We have also COVID and individual companies donate every time to wherever location states that they are located. So what is the new normal? Well, I said post-COVID, we don't know, it's not post-COVID now. We're still in it. So what is the normal? The new normal is, for instance, social distancing. That I hope people will comply. We see that in some enclosed environment, they comply. But what do? We go through the streets and we see people standing at the bus stop. The compliance in such places is very low. So, but it's here to stay because social distance, we had during the war against indiscipline, which was why queuing became very for something that we invite during the war against indiscipline. So social distancing, we need to also invite and also brace up for lockdowns. Like I said, we don't know where the peak, whether we've reached the peak, we haven't reached the peak. And people are all over the place, and state governments or federal government, they're assessing the situation, and they could still be more lockdowns. I'm not saying it, but from what is happening, there's likely to. For instance, meetings now have a new meaning. There we are, having Zoom. Board meetings are held on Zoom. All sorts of meetings, all the meetings are held on Zoom where they have regulations, and within 2-3 hours, everything is gone. So it's a new normal, even going forward. Even after COVID, I'm sure some organizations will still imbibe, not necessarily completely, but there will still be some aspect of meetings holding virtual and all that. Global travel may have changed forever. To know that we as Nigerians can stay in this country without traveling for 3 months. I mean, life speaks volume that being alive, you have to be alive to travel. And it has changed forever. Hopefully the first local flight will take place this week. And we hope with that, if they comply, because all the analysis and the analysis that were held on with the ministers and the aviation industry, people are still, they are also not very sure how compliant people will be on board. So these things need to, for instance, physical events may never be the same. And this is why people who are doing events, my heart goes out to them. But they also need to invent. They can't just sit down. They shouldn't just sit down and think that that's the end of it. But they have to reinvent. They have to reinvent what physical events should be like, where health issues are taken into consideration and make sure that people are safe. Everything is going online for real this time. We're already used to Amazon buying things online. It's even more important now. So new normal, weddings, birthdays are happening online, and I've attended some of them, and it was fantastic. And I think that's going to take place very. So what do we have? Banking and economy in distress. But with most sectors of the economy struggling to stay afloat, banks have to do more to help businesses make it. Not just out of the pandemic, but during, which is why I said we should not wait till after the pandemic before we do something. Well, in the banking industry, we agree that banking has gone beyond traditional banking in this country. For instance, we have the video, music, we have the video and music online. That's something that Nigerians are used to now. Even shopping online, like I just said, e-commerce, chatting, and paying electronically. And I hope and I believe very soon, this will be extended to travels and entertainment, because those sectors have been badly hit by the pandemic. How have we fared as finance? Banks have continued to make concerted effort to keep basic services up and running. There was a time, and there's still a time. Banks don't have to open fully. We have to send an email. These are the branches that we open this week, so customers will know where to go to. And the following week, they have to do another. And also, you also have the staff also, they need to be protected, because if you open all the branches and something goes wrong, then there's a problem, but you have to have some as backup. So that's why they're alternating what branches open in a particular week, and so that people will continue to have basic banking services running. Yes, we have gaps in the digital onboarding, and which is why we need to. 3 must do for banks. We have to get all customers online and on mobile. Digitize all banking processes for end-to-end customer usage. Simplify and accelerate remote resolution of all service issues. For instance, opening an account with your phone. Like I keep saying, whatever you cannot do on your phone, forget it. You have everything now you can run from your phone, sitting anywhere in your car, in your house, anywhere, just a small phone. And opening an account, it doesn't take much. And a lot of the requirements have been reduced a lot. You don't need a BVN to open an account. However, because the person is using a particular number, that number is what the bank will always look for. Because changing a number anyhow, when you come and you change your number, you have to find out why did you change your number, because that's what the banks will have. And that's how banks will be driving digital migration. Also, of course, we talked about the banks doing for small businesses. During the time, they had to Um, the moratorium was moved by 6 months. Those who had 3 months were moved by 6 months. However, it's not cast in stone. If anything, if it needs to go beyond that, they will have to, because we're living from day to day. And the banks, of course, will have to imagine the financial services rapidly so that people will know that this is a new normal. People need to know what to do. Post-COVID-19 on the horizon. What is on the horizon? Well, there's no vaccine. Research is still going on all over. And even if there is vaccine, we don't want to be the test pigs. People who brought that vaccine, they have to try it. And in that area, there's a minimum time that they have to do the testing before it becomes on commercial basis. Well, economists and businesses who adopt smart policies and stay nimble may find more sustainable ways to thrive. Gone are the days where you have all sorts of documentation and procedures. If you do, people will leave you and find where they have less procedures and go on with their life and make things easy. So we have to stay very nimble when we address immediate challenges, and we're going to, with two, create a bounce back plan in case something happens. What will happen? We have to start thinking, what should the next plan be in case something happens with the arrangement you have currently. And with three, it's to reimagine the new normal, like what we've been saying all along. What will happen if this doesn't happen? What should we put in place? How are we going to go about it? Banking has gone beyond traditional banking, and banks are up to task. They need to for safeguard life first and foremost. Yeah, this is it's a health issue, so we need to safeguard life. Strictly adhere to public safety guidelines, and that's what we need to go. I don't know at what level. We need to educate our people. They need to comply. There's no myth about COVID. It is real. How we can reach our people is very important, because you don't find out, but before you know it, the community infection will rise, and they have not been prepared. They have not been prepared for it. Also, have to safeguard livelihood, protect jobs, take care of employees, support businesses and customers. A lot of even when people are working, there are a lot of palliatives that organizations are putting in place for their staff, and protecting them. We must take, it's a community thing. Nobody can do it alone. And all the organizations, private sector will work with government, and government also should be open and also work with us, and so that we can move forward. It is real. Pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is real, and we have to be careful so that the spread does not go beyond what we can manage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, thank you so very much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Madam Chairman. We'll take our final speaker now. His wife describes him as the template for men seeking to balance work and family life. And for that, we say congratulations, sir. He is Nigeria's Minister of State for Budget and National Planning. Please welcome Prince Clem Agba. The floor is yours, sir.
So thank you very much for having me. I understand that this is about the third webinar you are having. Congratulations. This morning I will speak through the background of the COVID-19. I will also be speaking on the impact of COVID-19, the economic sustainability plan that has been put in place by government. I will look through the fiscal, the monetary, and also the risk sector measures and programs that have been designed for implementation, and how we intend to deliver on the plan. The first case of COVID-19 was February 27th by an Italian citizen. And since then, we've had about 24,567 cases. This was at yesterday. About 9,000 or so have recovered.
We apologize for the glitch. Just hang on, please. Okay, I'm sure the minister will rejoin. Okay, while we wait for him to reconnect, I would like to just quickly commence the question segment. The first question will go to Madam Chairman, and it's around the whole subject of social distancing and some of the changes that are happening, like you rightly mentioned, with respect to COVID-19. And now I would like to find out what structural changes are happening, for example, within the GTB to reduce things like queues in banks. You've talked about automation, you've talked about the need to be flexible. And I know also that banks are used to uncertainties, even though COVID-19 is a unique challenge. What are you doing specifically to address concerns like that? What structural changes will make life easier for people when they come to GT Bank? Khalil, can you please unmute her, please?
When the minister was talking here.
Yes.
Yeah, if you go around the various branches of banks, not just GT, you see that even on the external, they already have the configuration where you can stand. It's been mapped out.
Okay.
Like I keep saying, it's left to us to be disciplined and comply. Because as we drive, we look at some of the branches, you can see our people still struggling, still arguing with the security. And that is not good for the system. So with banks, that has been done, the distancing. Even they also come in and clean the ATM outside frequently as much as it's being used. Internal also the same. The distancing also be marked. Everything is marked on the floor. You can't go beyond a certain distance. And of course, mask. If you don't have any mask on, you don't go near any bank. No bank will allow you into their premises. And well, whatever government, we are complying. Like I will keep saying, government has given us these guidelines and we need to comply. And that's what we tell our customers. We have to comply. It's for our own good.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, the minister is back. Sorry for that glitch, you understand. So you can see from where you left off. Yes.
Yeah, like I was saying, okay, the pandemic has virtually affected 35 states, FCT inclusive. And this has kind of created disruptions in economic activities. Because there's this disruption, which is not limited to Nigeria. It's a worldwide supply chain disruptions. There's fall in demand, there's also fall in supply. And Nigeria being a mono-dependent economy, we largely depend on crude oil for foreign exchange. We have been affected. Bonny Light crude oil, which was $72 in January, fell as below $20 in April. In fact, there was a period that it went up to $12 within that period. I recall that our budget was a benchmark of $57 per barrel. So there was a need for us to revise the various assumptions that we made at the beginning. There's been a fear of an increased unemployment because of layoffs since companies are down. And we're very much worried about the misery in the informal sector, those daily wage owners, street vendors, petty traders who rely on day-to-day sales in order to have a living. Like I said earlier on, oil price had a benchmark of $57 per barrel in our 2020 budget. we have had to revise this downwards to $28 per barrel. This is a decline of about 51%. This has also affected our revenue projections for the year, given that oil is the main driver of the economy, and a lot of activities that go on in the economy are dependent on what happens in the oil sector. And because of the lockdowns, there are fewer suppliers, fewer demands, so customs revenue is also depleting. So this has created a funding gap of about $12 billion for our budget. And again, it has also affected the Federation account allocation to states by about 35%. So we've had to come up with measures. First, short-term measures, which is the economic sustainability plan, and then the medium and long-term, which are going to be addressed through the process of the successor plan to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, which ends this year. So the Economic Sustainability Plan has been designed as a 12-month plan. Like I said, it does not replace the medium-term development plan, which is currently ongoing. In this plan, we have said, first and foremost, there must be no austerity measures, because at a time like this, is a time to create a lot more economic activities in order to ensure that even if there were a recession, that recession is not long, it is shallow, and it's a V-shape. Two, we said we have to realign our budget in terms of priorities, move funds from certain areas to areas of priorities that is going to not only retain jobs in the economy, but also help to create more jobs and keep the economy going. And thirdly, and most importantly, is to ensure that we have a stimulus package in the economy. Like I said earlier on, we have had to revise the MTEF benchmark, which are the crude oil price, the crude oil production, and then the exchange rate. So there are basically three pillars to this sustainability plan: a real sector, physical and monetary plans, and then implementation. Underlining this as foundational issues is, why do we want to do this? Because we want to keep our economy off the ravages of the pandemic. Remember, it started as a health pandemic, but it's now a pandemic within the pandemic. Hence, we are now having an economic pandemic to keep our recession short-lived. Our last year, fourth quarter GDP was 2.55%. This year's first quarter GDP was 1.87%. So when you compare this to previous years, 2019, where it was 2.1, and then also 2018, you'll find that GDP growth is slowing down. And with activities not taking place in the economy, we know definitely that we will go into a recession. But the issue now is, what do we do to ensure that that recession itself is short-lived and shallow, and that we make a quick recovery? And that with that recovery, it is V-shaped, and shouldn't be either U or W-shaped. We don't want to go up and come down, go up and come down. We just want to be able to bounce back to growth. And then we looked at how we are able to build resilience in our various systems and operations going forward. Looking at the health sector, for instance, what is the state of our infrastructure? How can we build up on this to ensure that we are able to look after our people? You know the way the Nigerian Constitution operates. Primary healthcare, for instance, and primary education is the responsibility of the subnationals. But that is the foundation for healthcare system. So we have had to create, through legislation, a primary healthcare fund where a percentage of the consolidated revenue is put aside and states are able to access it through counterpart funding. So as part of the other objectives for this plan is how to stimulate the economy by preventing business collapse and ensuring that there is enough liquidity in the system, retaining and creating jobs, undertaking mass housing programs, agricultural programs, promoting local manufacturing, local production, and local content. And then how do we extend protection to the very poor and the vulnerable in the society? I'm trying to run through this very quickly, noting that I have only about 10 minutes. For the fiscal measures, what we have done is to provide some form of support to the private sector through the programs that have been designed, safeguarding oil revenues. First, we have had to deregulate and remove the fuel subsidy. The country was spending close to ₦1 trillion in subsidy that should have gone into a lot of capital investments. And this subsidy is not only in petroleum, we also have subsidy in power. And maybe as we speak much later, with having a deal on, we can also talk about the subsidies that we have in the power sector. So I mentioned a while ago that we have a funding gap of about $12 billion. And to ensure that we cover this up, we have engaged in mobilizing external funding. First is the $3.4 billion IMF facility. This is not a regular IMF loan with conditionalities. So I need Nigerians to be very, very clear about this. This is at a 1% and several years of moratorium. We have already received those funding and it's with us in country. We are following up on the $2.5 billion facility from the World Bank. 1.5 billion of this will be budget support for the revised 2020 federal budget. And the other 1 billion will be to support the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. We're getting $500 million from the African Development Bank, $500 million from Afrexim Bank, and about $113 million from the Islamic Development Bank. All of these come with moratoriums. So for stimulus, the Federal Executive Council has since approved a 2.3 trillion stimulus. And this is made up of about 500 billion from special accounts that will be used to fund the programs that have been put in place. About 1.2 trillion will come as facilities through the financial institutions led by the Central Bank of Nigeria. These are going to be at 5% interest rates with a 1-year moratorium. We are getting funding from bilateral and multilateral agencies of about 334 billion. And we're also looking at other sources of funding from the federal government of Nigeria for about 300 billion. What do we want to use all of this for? First, to support the states. We have since given to Lagos State 10 billion to help them fight COVID-19 in their operations. And the other 35 states, beg your pardon, and the Federal Capital Territory, we have also provisioned $1 billion each for them. There is, in terms of sectorial intervention, a lot of focus on agriculture. And here we're talking about mass agriculture. The president says that he wants us to eat what we produce and produce what we eat. So there are sectorial programs around mass housing. I'm going to speak to this much in detail later. Public works, solar power installations, support to micro, medium, and small business enterprises. And then there are also social programs for cash transfer. This is where we have, in the current social register, which is supervised by the World Bank, we had about 2.6 million people. The president had approved that the additional 1 million that have since gone through the biometrics for whom we have data be included. So that takes it to 3.6 million in the social register. Again, the registers are developed in collaboration with the subnationals, I mean the state government. We are giving some attention to the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced People. And then we also have a national WASH program, which will focus on providing sanitation facilities in parks and markets. This is in line with the COVID protocols. Let me go straight to more details around the sustainability programs. First and foremost is what I said, that Mr. President says we must produce what we eat and eat what we produce. And how do we do this? Currently, as a nation, we produce quite a lot of food, but about 40 to 60% of it goes to waste. So we're putting measures in place to ensure that post-harvest losses are reduced. And one way of doing this is to ensure that it is a lot easier to evacuate what is produced, which are mostly in our rural areas, by putting a lot of funding in building rural roads around our agro corridors across the 6 geopolitical zones. This is with a view to encourage value chain adding companies to set up in these areas so that they can put up facilities for not only storage, but also for processing of food that is produced around these agro corridors. We are working in consonance with the subnationals to also expand the current acreages for food production between 20,000 to 100,000 hectares of land across the states. We are also, as a program, putting a lot of funding around rehabilitation of major highways across the country, and also ensuring that there's a linkage between these highways and the railway corridors, and also the rural roads that we are developing to ensure that food actually gets to the market. There is a job creation scheme for youth and women. Most of this is around acquisition of digital skills, training for our youth, with a view to ensuring that after the trainings and the items that they are given, they should be able to run on their own. However, they would also have access to about 425 billion special fund that has been created for MSMEs. But these are not grants, they are loans that are going to be paid at 5% interest rates. We are also trying to support jobs around mining by also making some funds available to artisanal and small-scale miners. I already spoke about the social intervention program, where the social register has been moved from 2.6 million to 3.6 million households. There is a guaranteed offtake support scheme for MSMEs. There is an MSME survivor fund, and then credit facilities are also being provided as working capitals for small businesses so that they are able to pay their workers and keep their jobs going. We are looking at the aviation sector, and I've also made provision of funding for this sector. Again, let me mention that these are not grants. They are loans at low interest rates and 1-year moratorium. I spoke a little while about the WASH program, but we have a program around mass rural electrification and solar power energy. We want to be able to link about 5 million homes off the national grid through the use of solar. We are engaging with a company that would be producing solar panels within the country. And then a lot of youth would have access to go through training on how to install these panels. We believe that this will help a lot in creating jobs. Nigeria is more of a gas nation than than an oil nation. And so we are looking at how to make use of our natural gas endowment by creating direct and indirect jobs over the next 12 months. Some foundries have been identified where trainings will be provided for about 5,000 youths so that they can learn how to weld the cylinders and also how to install them in homes. A mass housing program is also be put in place and funding made available through offtake programs. This is to ensure that first we make use of local materials, and this housing are not going to be contrast to big time contractors. We are looking at young graduates, engineers, 4 or 5 who will cluster together, and then they will be given these houses to build with a view to keeping them busy. To ensure that states are able to meet up with their responsibilities and also to augment the federation account, we are taking $150 million from the National Sovereign Wealth Fund as approved by Mr. President, and a $1 billion World Bank loan. The budget support facilities that were taken by the bank earlier on, we have negotiated with the central bank to allow for suspension of the interest payments and ISPO at this time until such a time when things would have improved. And then also to provide the moratoriums on deductions on the various bailout loans that the states took. I am sure you all must have seen what happened at the National Assembly with my brother Minister Festus Keyamo. That has to do with the public works program that Mr. President has approved, 1,000 per local government in the country, which translates to 774,000 jobs. We have also ensured that the frontline workers, that's the health workers, at hazard allowance have been provided to encourage them and to motivate them to do the right thing. So in concluding, I want to say that COVID-19 has resulted in a global shutdown in virtually every aspect of life, manufacturing, services, and commerce. And that if there is no stimulus done, or if we adopt austerity measures, we'll find that our economy will contract to a worst case scenario of about 8.9% GDP and a best case scenario of 4.4%. But with a stimulus, and if properly implemented, we expect that the negative growth will be in the region of about 1.5%. So to prevent having a deep recession, like I said, we had mobilized external support and funding for the revised 2020 budget. We have put measures to increase our non-oil revenue generation, and we have also provided a stimulus package of 2.3 trillion. The country's recovery largely depends also on the states and the local government. I know that in Nigeria, when we talk about government, people just think it's federal government. But it is the local government that is closest to the people where things really need to be happening, and then at the state level. And I also want to say to our youth, there are a lot of opportunities that are in the stimulus package that has been given. Take advantage of them. Look at the areas where you can get yourself really engaged and self-employed, and take the facilities that have been provided. Because like I said, there are 5% interest rate and 1-year moratorium. I haven't said all of this. The success of the sustainability plan itself depends on the delivery. And that is why we have ensured and made enough provisions for the National Monitoring and Evaluation Department of the Federal Ministry of Budget and National Planning to be fully engaged to monitor this plan and ensure that it is well executed. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you all our speakers for the excellent presentations. Because we're running out of time, I'll take all the questions we've collated so far for each of our speakers, and then you have limited time to please respond, because I know you have very busy schedules. We want to make sure that we leave here by 3 p.m. So I'll start with the power sector. Engineer Dere, are you on scene?
Yes, I'm here.
In doing our preliminary research for this program, we talked to a lot of persons around your coverage area in Lagos. And what we began to kind of understand was people were complaining about some kind of asymmetrical or preferential power distribution in your area of coverage. I would like you to please speak to that and what you're doing, if that is the case, to provide equitably distribute electricity to all your customers. What has been done in that regard? Then I'd also like you to speak to how the generation and transmission value chain is affecting your own side of the power distribution in terms of reaching your customers. I'd also like you to please explain to us, if you can, why is it we're generating, we have capacity to produce 12,000 kilowatts of power, but we are only producing less than 5K. I'm sure that's part of the problem that you have, but can you please explain some of this to us?
Okay, so I'll take the first question, which you talked about, the preliminary, basically the preferential power distribution structure.
Yes.
Again, without sounding like an enemy of states, the point is this couldn't be farther from the truth. It's not the case. We need to basically understand I need everybody to kind of understand is that it's a capital intensive business. It requires, so I feel for places, some places require really extensive upgrades. The terrain is different, the location, without going into too much details. The point is, as we receive power to different feeders within our network, and we try to distribute them around, some areas, maybe more newly built areas, for example, might have infrastructure that is able to distribute the power with less faults. Because of time, I'm being conscious. I can keep going on because this is my area. But no, there is no business of taking the public grid energy and trying to preferentially distribute it. The second question was around basically, I think the impact, if I wrote it right, or the value chain in terms of generation and transmission. Did I pick that right?
Yes.
The value chain
and distribution.
Okay. We basically, again, we distribute to the extent that we receive. In Nigeria, for example, like you rightly said, we have an installed base of about 13. I think you said 12, about 13 gigawatts. If you look at the TCN, the transmission infrastructure that we say can wheel about 8 gigawatts. The highest amount of energy that we've wheeled from natural grid to date is about 5,375 megawatts, to give you an idea. And that rolls into your next question, which states that why are we then generating less than 5K or around 5K, and how does this affect distribution? Basically, we again, just to touch on the subject, I'm happy to discuss it further or have people send you questions so that we can give better answers to the people on this line. There's limitations clearly on the national grid, as mentioned, and then which we're looking into now, I'm sure, which I know the government is looking into now. And then there's a limitation in terms of the supply of good quality gas. So again, a number of our thermal plants need to be able to generate to their maximum capacity. Like, you know, I'm not a disco guy only. I'm a Genco guy. I also work to leading Transco Power. So I have love for both the Gencos and the discos. So, and most importantly, to get the customers what they need. Thank you. I'll try to rush through that.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll come back to you, especially if we have more time, because lots of questions. If we start taking them, we might not even leave here. So I'll go to Madam Chairman. People have talked about concerns regarding job cuts or job gains in the banking sector. Which one, and how do people prepare themselves for the future of banking in Nigeria, at least? There's also questions around what is being done to change people's perception about banks. Just a few days ago, we know what happened with respect to Access Bank and how people were complaining. And just sort of the subjects around why people generally hate banks, especially post-COVID-19. We know that people are stressed for money, what is being done to change the perception. And finally, because you are a shining light with respect to women all around the world, especially to us in Nigeria, what can you say regarding survival of women within the workplace, especially banking sector, with respect to misogyny, gender bias, or harassment?
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Well, globally, very few people have lived through a pandemic. We have, in developed countries, we have fire outbreaks, flood. Those are not global. So no one really knows if this will mean more job cuts or job gains. However, what we know is that almost all the sectors, except pharmaceutical and healthcare, have been drastically affected. You have reduced hours. You have, as a result, in some countries of curfew, people want to get home in time before the time so they don't get arrested. Reduce people, reduce physical offerings. But for the few hours that people work, I would say there's more productivity. For instance, you don't spend all the hours in traffic, so you spend more time on the job. So whether there will be job cuts or job gains will depend on the priorities today and strategies for the future. But everybody will manage what they have, what they need to manage. Yeah. The other one you talk about, of course, job cut. Also, you need to skill. We've heard it so much. You have to skill yourself. There's an Indian mystic who said, you either skill yourself or you kill yourself. So now you have to look at what skill. Doesn't matter what you learned when you went to university. That is not. You have to look at the sector, and that's what the minister said. People now have to look at health or pharmaceutical and learn a skill that those people can use. You can use in those sectors, since your own sector could be drastically affected. And of course, technology, where doesn't have to physically see anyone for a transaction, you need also to equip yourself technologically. Skills, fintech will be the more desirable and sustainable for the new banker. You have to know about technology. It's no longer manual and it's faster. And so you just keep improving yourself. Look at where they need your skills, and then you get that new skills to improve your job. On the third one is about women, right? Yeah. Well, I'm really proud of the achievements that women have made in the banking and financial services sector, even in some other high technology professions, in spite of the prevailing gender bias. They have come out. Yeah, women are 51% of the population. So you will expect that when you go to some organizations, you should have more women. But that's not happening. And for instance, a few days ago, in 2020, to know that I think there was a company on Nigerian Stock Exchange, all the boards are men, no single woman. And you wonder, how can that management and the board representation must be balanced? This has always been said. No, they talked about 1/3 or no 1/3, even that 1/3. People are not serious about it. They just a token. They have a woman or two. And anybody that has a woman or two in board representation management is not serious and hasn't started what diversity is all about. And what I would say to the women is that women need not put their sweat in a company that is not interested in representing them. They have to be deliberate about looking for companies that have women in diverse roles in key operational functions, not necessarily limited to admin and HR, because that's they say we have women, but when you find out they're in HR, they're in admin, but they're technical women. Maybe I want to share a story with you. It happened when I was in the 70s. Before the 70s, there were no women professionals in any department in central bank. The women in central bank were note counters and secretaries. So what the central bank, when they started employing graduate females. By an unwritten law, they would deploy them to research department, not the request of the woman. They just took all the women to research department. And we started wondering, why would all the women be in research department? And the women got together and said, let's go. Why are we all in research department? Your discipline is different, mine is different, I have operational. Why are we not in operational? So we wrote not a protest letter, we wrote a memo to the then governor, so rest in Mr. Ahmed. And we said, we want to be in all the departments. Oh, you know, you are women, you are mothers, you are wives. We said, no, don't take that decision on our behalf. Let us give it to us and let us be the one who make that decision. And they said, fine, which was when they started deploying women to other departments of the central bank. If that did not happen, I'm not sure I'll be sitting here where I am now. And also we'll have my colleague, Mr. Kondus, also on the board. So this was, people make decisions on your behalf without actually seeking the opinion of the woman. And I think they should allow people to make decisions for themselves. Use them to what they have, use their talents for where they fit. And not just because they're women, oh, they can't be transferred to the branches, why not? So, so women, look at any organization that is not after your interest, you don't go near there, go out, you get something better. So no token for a woman, it shouldn't be. Thank you. If I've answered the other question, I don't know.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much, ma'am. And you heard it live on Thrive 3.0. Madam Chairman says women need to take the lead. You have to go to where you're needed and treated properly. Okay, so we'll take the questions for the Honorable Minister, and I'll just run through them. The first one is around the question of lack of data problem in Nigeria. As first of all, your background, supply chain management, and all your years of service in the country, there's always there's a need for data before we can plan. I listened to some of the interviews you granted 7-8 years ago, and I think some of those people predicted that you were going to be a national planning minister, and here you are today. So what are we doing to deal with Nigeria's lack of data problem? You talked about stimulus packages. You talked about giving monies to states. But how are we sure the right people are getting this money if we don't have data? Because even as a researcher, I'm constantly confronted with Nigeria's lack of data problem. That's the first question. The second question is around the subject of your new plan for the medium-term national development plan, shelving the Vision 2020. I intercepted a conversation between someone who is supposed to be a member of the committee that is currently being formed and another person, a tweeter. And she asked this question: has there been a national review of Nigeria's Vision 2020? Because we can't just envision 2050 without reviewing the immediate past plans and the lessons that should be learned, including achievements. So you'd like to also respond to that for us. Then there's also a little concern, or major concern that was watching the media about a 43% cut in the health budget amid COVID-19, while the National Assembly is getting a facelift. But I also read an article where you said that there was no cut. There was instead a boost in the health sector. If you'd like to clear that for us. And then finally, we'd like to know the extent of involvement of the Nigerian youth in the committees that you're forming for Nigeria Agenda 2050. That's because anyone, for example, that is 40 or 50 now is going to be 70 or 80. And so this plan is more of a youthful plan. How are they involved in the process? All right. I don't know if you got the questions. Do I have to repeat them? Or you can take them then.
Yeah, I got the questions, and I will answer them in no particular order as you put them. First, I'd like to speak about the so-called 43% cut in health sector budget. First, I want to say it's a big lie. There was no cut. What the journalists tended to speak about is the reduction in the statutory allocation for the basic health. And that is a percentage of the consolidated revenue. So if you earn high, the amount you are going to get will be high. If the earnings is low, the amount that you get will be low. Like I said, because of the revision of the budget benchmarks, first the oil pricing, which went down. Secondly, we also talk about production that has been reduced from 2.1 million barrels a day to 1.8 million barrels a day. What it means is that what will go to the consolidated revenue fund is lower. And like I did say, there is almost a 51% reduction in the revenues that we are expecting. So since the basic health care law talks about a percentage, when you apply that percent to the revenue that has come in, what was originally there is lower. However, I did mention in the course of my presentation that this wasn't about austerity measures. It was about putting more into the system. And I also did mention that we took some funds from special accounts to reflect the economy and put in the budget. So the revised budget for 2020 is significantly higher than what it was. Aside from that, there's also 126 billion that has been put aside for building health infrastructure and operations and ensuring that there's resilience across the country. In fact, 37 centers have been identified, one in each of the states, and then one in the Federal Capital Territory, where facelift will be given to the facilities that are currently there. And then they're also giving additional funding for running the operations. Youth in National Development Plan, there is a specific thematic working group that is designed for youths. And in membership of that thematic group are even young graduates, both male and female. The National Development Plan that we are currently putting in place is totally different from what has happened in the past. For the first time, we are having a true national development plan. And what do I mean by true national development plan? In the past, the plans have been considered to be federal government plan because a lot of other sectors, the subnationals, the private sector, have really not been involved in the conceptualization of the plan. But Mr. President has approved our recommendation that this plan should be led by the organized private sector. And he has also approved that Mr. Atedo Peterside will be the chairman of the steering committee for this national development plan. And to also ensure that we take care of the various diversities, and I'm sure that Mrs. Demuren will like this, we have a woman as a co-chair, the Minister of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, because the government is going to be an enabler. So we deliberately ensured we have that balance. And we looked at the various diversities that we have in the country. Religious diversities were also considered. So we have representation from Christian Association of Nigeria and from the Muslim group. The Women's Society are represented. A formidable youth organization is also there at the steering committee level, apart from work that is going on at the technical working group level. So we have even taken time to ensure that the states are represented. There are 6 governors from each of the 6 geopolitical zones. We've even gone further to involve the 3 main political parties in the country. That is the current ruling party, APC, PDP, and ABGA, to have representation at the steering committee level. The issue of data, yes, you're absolutely right. We have data collection in different places, and we are putting a lot of emphasis in funding the National Bureau of Statistics, which is our premier data collection organization, to ensure, that they do what they are set up to do. Currently, we find that donor agencies, multilateral agencies are the ones funding, but they cannot be the ones funding our data. So we are making a commitment that in the budget itself, we make provision to ensure that MBS is able to do that which they are supposed to do. And this year alone, we did give them additional funding, and the expectation is that in 2021, we will give them more. I hope that I've addressed the 4 different questions that you asked.
If addressed them to some extent, if we have time, we'll come back. There's just some emerging thoughts as you were speaking, because, for example, you talk about the NBS, but we're thinking about, what about population? every time we want to talk about the population of Nigeria, making estimates, 180 million, 200 million. So there's a need for a census 2006. But we'll see if we can come back to you to speak to that. But I'll go back now to Engineer Adeoye, where you have tons of questions here. And people are sending me messages from the mainland area, people from Chevron, attesting to some of the things I said. But I'll read out this one by Onyewuchi Onyegala. He says, during the lockdown, it is natural to say that the rate of power theft was high, where people try to compromise the legal connections just to avoid being billed. If this is true, how were you able to fight it? And going forward, how fast are you going to actualize the anti-theft technologies like the IoT? You want to respond to that?
Absolutely. Look, I think during the lockdown, I think a number of things became very interesting. I think I answered this particular question on the Q&A group. But for everybody else to hear it, during this period, it was funny that we got probably one of the highest, I would say at least top 2 in terms of energy that was distributed within my network, within a co-electricity network during this COVID period. Also, interestingly, we got our lowest revenue recorded ever in the last, probably almost a 26% spike in what we call our ATC and C. So, for example, where we'd used up energy and a bill from the market, from the bulk trader and the market operator of north of 8 billion naira, we were able to collect in that particular COVID month where we had a lockdown, I think less than half of that. So what I would say is that indicates that yes, there was a lot of energy theft. And I think one thing to face a bit of reality is let's divide up the people let's divide the energy theft during the period of COVID into 2. One might be cases of people that have no other choice, where they need the electricity, don't have the means. That is one that we saw a lot of during that period that people were home. The second is just people that took the electricity, have the means, but chose not to pay. What we've done, again, like I said, is where we had smart metering during this period, we found that we were able to secure the revenues in terms of revenue protection. The ability to remotely disconnect these homes from offices or from wherever we are, any location, was key. But the other unmetered customers and non-smart meters and anti-theft devices not in place. We realized that post-COVID, our reality is that no choice. It's not just to meter in Nigeria. It's not just okay. People know how to get by that successfully. Again, with some help sometimes internally. But I think that the next step is to ensure that we not only meet the but
Apologize for that glitch. I'm sure he'll be back. But while we wait,
sure that we're together. Oh, I'm here. Please.
Okay, great.
Hello.
We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, what did you hear last? I finished and I said thank you. I didn't know you weren't hearing me anymore.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm sure that question, we'll find out from Onyewuchi if that question was satisfactorily answered. If not, we'll get back to you. And considering the number of questions I have here, dear speakers, please, you may have to come back to Thrive to do another session because there are so many. I'll go now to the question from Madam Chairman. Joel Alozie Wachuku has this question for you. He says, COVID-19 has truly changed the world as we know it. It has almost wiped out the middle class in Nigeria and will do so in the coming months. My question is, dear Chairwoman, how are the banks ready to support small businesses, especially small e-businesses in this new reality?
Yeah.
Did you get a question?
Yeah.
Madam? Okay.
Yeah. Well, the banks, like I said in my presentation, I did say that because they know what is happening, they're part of the system. They are very ready to support small and medium enterprises. But for instance, they reduced the moratorium, which was 3 months to 6 months. And I said, that's not even the limit. It depends on what is happening. They have to look at the realities on ground today to be able to implement the strategies they have for the future. The banks are ready, they are doing all, they are putting things in place to help because indeed, worldwide, if you look at the economy of this, is the small and medium that actually build up the economy of most countries.
Yes.
It's not multinational or whatever. How many people are there employment? It's small and medium enterprises. And the banks realize that. And they're putting everything in place, what they can in place to encourage. But sometimes you meet some of our people, they don't want to do certain jobs. And I keep saying, why won't you work? Look at, there was a lawyer who said, I said, why you did law? Because your parents wanted you to do law. What do you have passion for? She has passion for food. She has a big restaurant now in Nikoyi. I had to cancel and start her down. Your parents wanted you to do law. You have passion. Go after your passion. What do you want to do? When you do it, you don't want it to fail. So that's where we need our people, the youth, to go after things they have passion for. So that when they do this, and the banks will say, they will look at it and they will support. So we're ready. The banks are ready.
Okay, banks are ready. You can approach them now. The next question is for Honorable Minister. This anonymous attendee says, please enlighten us on the modalities and processes conducted to determine the country's budget. What areas do you and your team analyze to arrive at our annual budget? You want to respond to this question, sir? Okay,
that's a very good one. We have what we call the medium-term expenditure framework, which we look at. And in doing that, you set some benchmarks for yourself to say, what revenues do we expect? And like I said, our major revenue earner, it's oil for foreign exchange. And then we look at the non-oil revenue side. And once we have been able to determine the revenue that we expect that will come in, then we look at our commitments, the non-discretionary expenditure. What are these non-discretionary expenditure? First, there are sovereign loans that we have, but they have to be serviced. So we look at what will it cost to service them. We put that aside. Then we now have a look at our salaries and pensions. And then we put that aside. We look at the statutory allocations, that is as envisaged by law, which are usually percentages of the CRF. Once we have looked at that, then what is now left is what we now deploy into capital and other areas. And in deploying them to capital, how do we choose the MDAs? They are based on the plans that have been put in place. Currently, what we are using is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, which will expire at the end of this year. So you look at your plan and the priorities that have been set aside, and you use that to do an envelope system of distributing funding that should go. But it should also understand that the budgeting itself is a process, okay? In the process, it involves not only the executive, but also the legislature. So we may make our proposals to say, maybe Abuja, Lokoja, Benin Road, that we want to put 10 billion to ensure that it is completed this year. But what we might get back might be Abuja, Lokoja, Benin with 300 million naira and the rest of the funds put into other areas. So therefore creating certain distortions and difficulties. And if we have to continue to go back and forth to argue, then there will be no budget, and you know the budget itself is law. So that's the framework which we use in doing our budget.
Wow, excellent. I want to appreciate you for your time. But we'll give Engineer Doye a minute to just wrap up here, and we'll also give a minute to each of our speakers to just round up, because we want to make sure that we end this in the next few minutes. Engineer Doye.
And I promise to not use more than a minute.
Great.
And I promise to not use more than a minute. I would use it to thank you, the organizers, thank Chairman Mr. Demoren and the Honorable Minister, and also to the people that are listening, all the attendees, and to say that for the power sector, we're going to continue to do everything we can. I can speak for a code distribution company that we're energized, we're ready to work. We want to ensure that we get supply to most people as we can. We understand the frustrations, keep the feedback coming, and for those that have had the experience, we say we don't mind. Keep it coming so that we can improve on supply. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Madam Chairman, please, final words. You're mute. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. I want to thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure. Any opportunity I get to talk, especially if there are issues concerning women, I'll be there.
Okay.
What I want to say is that people should approach the bank with an open mind, because some people come to the bank, take a loan. They already made up their mind that they're not going to pay that loan. They see it as part of whatever government our own share. So when you have a good plan, good feasibility study, and you approach someone, don't go round back. Approach people in the sector, in that section. They'll even advise you if your feasibility study is not appropriate. They will advise. So we should approach the bank with an open mind, and open plan, so that we can also be happy that we're helping the people to grow, to get an economic means of livelihood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And finally, Honorable Minister, sir, the floor is yours.
First, I'll say thank you for having me, but I also want to make a little bit of comment around the discourse. Yeah, because when Adeoye was speaking, he talked about increase in tariff and he mentioned that it's been put on hold. What was going on was not an increase in tariff, but a service-based cost-reflective tariff system, which we had advised that be put in place, because currently the government is subsidizing power at the sum of 12 billion a week. And that translates to 50 billion a month. So when you look at that in a year, it's a lot of wasted resources. So resources that would have been put in building better roads in our rails and hospitals. We have said that the current subsidy regime is regressive. It is regressive because we are subsidizing the rich and not the poor. We have done our analysis, and it shows that about 60% of the subsidy goes to only 10% of the population. And that is why we encourage the willing buyer, willing seller agreement. Where I live, for instance, I almost get 24 hours of power. I guess so because I'm paying the actual rate for it. We know that it costs a lot more than 30 naira per kilowatt. You know, currently we are charging below the cost. So if you want power, we should be able to pay for it. So what we have said is that for those in the band A, B, and C that are currently having those 24/7 power, they should pay the right price for it. And that whatever is now gotten from it will now be used to subsidize the other areas. So that as the service now improves in those areas, the rates can go up. That is why it's a cost-reflective tariff. It's not a general tariff increase. And only last week we engaged the National Assembly to give them the details of this, because it all amounts to waste of funds. You spend almost $1 trillion for petroleum product. You do close to another $1 trillion for power that should have gone into infrastructure. So we are just eating up our future if we do not have a service-based or cost-reflective tariff. And the only people holding us back are the discos. So they need to really come on board and ensure that the cost-reflective tariffs are implemented.
Wow. And the disco boss is here himself. I think this conversation has to continue on Thrive. And please, when we reach out to our dear speakers, we know how busy you are. We hope you also accept our invitation to come talk with us again. I apologize to all our listeners. We could not take all your questions, but we'll find a way to respond to you. And when we do invite you again, please do come to Thrive. Thank you to our guests we've had on today's Thrive 3.0, the Chairman, GT Bank, Mrs. Osariton Demuren, CEO, Eco Electricity Distribution Company, Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi, and finally, the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba. Thank you so much. I'll yield now to the co-convener, Thrive Consortium, Mr. Solomon Agba, for the big applause. Thank you so much.
I want to thank our panelists, not many particular, that Mrs. Demuren, Chairman of GT Bank, Engineer Adeoye, CEO of Eco Fiscal, and Prince Clem Agba, the Honorable Minister, for finding time out of a very busy schedule to stay on this podium and talk to Nigerians. That's been a very enlightening moment. Your cocktail of intelligence, information that you have put up into the space. I hope the audience can find time to internalize them, take the opportunities that this environment has provided. What we have heard across board is that there should be a paradigm shift. People should pursue their passion. There's a lot of information in the government space and the private sector space. Nigerians should go after it. I would believe that this is not really a pandemic that of stumbling blocks, but a pandemic that will provide opportunity for everybody to thrive on. Thank you very much. And like my co-convener said, we hope you will oblige us, your presence again, whenever we come for you. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the audience. We hope that you'll stay tuned with us when we come with Thrive 4.0. God bless you all and good afternoon.
Okay, goodbye everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.